evening. Our top story this week. In California, an appeals court rules that spanking a kid with a wooden spoon is not child abuse after dropping charges against a mother who spanked her 12-year-old with a wooden spoon so hard that it left bruises. A California foster care agency who had been cited several times for abuse of the kids finally loses its contract with Los Angeles County because they mismanaged millions in taxpayer dollars. In Wisconsin, a new state audit of taxpayer-funded foster care agencies questions $130,000 in questionable charges for parties, board meetings, and charitable contributions. And one Wisconsin state senator is still upset over foster care agency reaching a settlement, which including them agreeing to pay back $1 million and keeping their license after getting busted for fraudulently billing the state $6.1 million. In Oklahoma, the real father of baby Veronica discusses his next legal moves in the case, while tribal leaders meet because they think that the baby Veronica case is setting a precedent against the Indian Child Welfare Act, which will give whites more access to their babies. In South Carolina, kids with child welfare involvement are dying because the child protective industry is handing off child abuse investigations to private agencies who aren't qualified to handle them while fudging the numbers regarding the number of kids who are actually at risk. And in Missouri, a state senator wants to talk to people who have had experience with the state's child protective industry. In Michigan, a court is asking the child protective industry if they're keeping foster kids safe and if they're staying in compliance with agreements made in regards to a lawsuit brought on by the watchdog group known as Children's Rights. In Connecticut, federal monitors who have been watching for 20 years now are saying that the child protective industry's staffing levels are inadequate, while the Connecticut child protective industry is planning to build a secure facility for girls who they are afraid will run away from foster care. In Colorado, two high-profile child welfare cases which lack transparency and accountability in a broken system is raising concerns about the safety of kids in the state, and American pro-lifers are adopting the extra embryos from other women's in vitro fertilization treatments, claiming that those babies should have just as much chance as any other. In Ireland, the Children's Ombudsman is asking the child protective industry why they haven't been providing the necessary therapeutic interventions for the kids they've been snatching. In Nigeria, orphanages are thriving by selling the babies to the people who need them for one reason or another. And in Russia, a bill that would strip same-sex couples of their parental rights advances in Parliament. In Australia, staffing shortages at the child protective industry are leaving foster kids in limbo as there aren't enough caseworkers to see their cases through. In Canada, an Alberta foster mother gets another 2 years added to her sentence after killing a 3-year-old in her care. A man from Oregon who killed his foster parents when he was 12 meets the same fate in Ontario more than 2 decades later. And CPS agents in Hamilton, Ontario protest cuts to their funding. In England this week, a foster parent got busted for filming children naked with a secret camera. Tracy Connolly, the mother of baby P, a 17-month-old who was killed by her boyfriend back in 2008, is due to be released after a parole hearing, which is pissing off practically every system suck in the United Kingdom. Haringey Council, who are the ones who actually failed baby P, is now being accused of another major failure after a serious case review reveals that they failed a little kid who was once found to have over 50 bruises on his body. And a British foster parent is being criticized at another case review because of her attitude towards punishment. In Florida this week, a CPS agent has been accused of falsifying reports by saying that she was visiting a family when she was really just having the mother send her cell phone pics of the kids. And in Las Vegas, a court-appointed guardian gets busted for ripping off the clients whose assets she was supposed to be looking after. In Arizona, a foster mother pleads guilty to 2 counts of child abuse after failing to report sexual abuse committed by her husband. An Arizona teenager is arrested after sexually abusing another kid at a group home. In Illinois, it is revealed that a substitute teacher who was accused of molesting 2 boys had also previously worked for the child protective industry for 18 years. And in Connecticut, a CPS agent who worked at a state psychiatric hospital was sentenced to 15 months in jail for sexually abusing a child in a case where the evidence was made murky by discussions of money between him and the accusers. In California, a man is found guilty in the beating death of his 8-month-old foster daughter. An Arizona foster mother pleads guilty in the accidental drowning death of an 8-month-old boy. In Oregon, a teenager is charged with killing his foster father and another man while at a camp on a hunting trip. In Washington, a couple is convicted of manslaughter after starving and beating the child who they adopted from Ethiopia, and 2 years after the kid's death, the state still hasn't done anything meaningful to ensure the safety of adopted children. And in Wisconsin, a judge will hold a hearing to see if charges should be filed in regards to a foster child who drowned to death back in 1988. In Arizona, siblings who are separated while in foster care get to spend a whole day together at a picnic. And a Colorado woman is trying to use Facebook to try to find her little brother who was stolen by CPS agents when they were little kids. In Florida, a The man testifies that the child protective industry failed to warn him about the abusive past of a child who he took into his home before the kid turned around and molested his biological son. In Nevada, a man is suing the family court, claiming the court marshals used excessive force against him when they handcuffed him and threw him headfirst to the floor, causing facial fractures, head contusions, spinal cord injuries, and a lost tooth. In Texas, an anti-abortion group is suing a judge for returning a 15-year-old girl to her legal guardian who she claims has a convicted sex offender boyfriend who is making advances on her. And in Maine, the mother of a missing toddler reserves the right to sue the child protective industry who placed her in the father's care from where she mysteriously disappeared. In New York, 2 CPS agents have been fired for mishandling child abuse complaints against a man who was accused of beating his girlfriend's 5-year-old to death last month. In Nebraska, a judge rules that a 16-year-old who he says is not mature enough to make her own decisions must instead respect her foster parents' religious beliefs and not have an abortion, forcing her to become a teen parent whose baby they're probably going to take away instead. And in California, a couple is suing the hospital for coercing the mother into signing a consent form for a tubal ligation while she was drugged in preparation for a C-section and under threat of being reported to Child Protective Services because of medical marijuana use. In Florida, police recapture a kid who was snatched by her mother during a supervised visit. In New Mexico, an Amber Alert was issued for a group of boys who went missing from a youth ranch that was under investigation for abuse, regarding residents' claims that they were shackled and beaten by staff for minor infractions such as being uncooperative. And finally, tonight, an 11-year-old Los Angeles foster kid hightails it from his foster home and sets out on an epic quest to find his real mother. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK. Over and out.